If you're joining us right now, I'm just waiting a moment for the number of attendees to kind of stabilize while people are getting signed in, and we're just waiting a moment and think we're just about there. It's kind of slowed down. Okay, all right, well, we're gonna get started. Good evening, my name is Jackie Dupler. I'm an attorney at the Sinas Dramis law firm in Lansing. Thank you for attending the People's Law School. This evening, we have an exciting presentation by Judge Curtis Bell from Kalamazoo County Probate Court. The subject tonight is the Silver Tsunami, Issues Impacting the Elderly. I just would like to give a brief introduction before we jump into everything. Next week, we do have a presentation again for People's Law School, and it is the new auto no-fault reform presented by Steve Sinas from my law firm. The format for this evening is a little bit different than we've done in the past few weeks for People's Law School. We're going to have a presentation for about an hour or so. If you would like to ask a question, Judge Bell would like to take those questions throughout the presentation. So with that, if you have a question and you are comfortable with your video feed being turned on, we'll ask that you use the raise your hand feature, and then we will hopefully use our technological skills here and be able to choose you and allow your face to be on the screen while you ask a question. If you would like to ask a question and you do not want your video feed to be turned on, please submit your question through the chat feature in Zoom, and then I will do my best to monitor that and ask Judge Bell those questions as they come in. A few things I would like to say about our wonderful speaker tonight. There's a lot to say about him, and I've just picked a few things from his bio that I'd like to share with you. Judge Bell is a proud Michigan State University Spartan, go green, and also a graduate of University of Iowa Law School, so he's also a Hawkeye. Judge Bell has served the Kalamazoo County as probate court judge since 2005, serving as chief judge to the Ninth Circuit and probate court 2014 to 2018. He currently serves as the presiding judge of the probate court with an emphasis on matters related to mental health, trusts, wills, and estates. He served 9 years in the family division of the circuit court deciding matters relating to families. As an adjunct professor at Western Michigan University's Haworth College of Business, he has continued to teach business law for 20 years. In 2017, he became faculty for the National Judicial College in Reno, Nevada. In 2018, he accepted an invitation to be an instructor at the Kalamazoo Valley Police Academy. He is involved in quite a few professional organizations. He is on the, he serves on the alumni board for James Madison College at Michigan State University, the steering committee for the 2021 National High School Mock Trial Competition, the Michigan Probate Judges Association Board, and is a current member of the Haworth College of Business Department of Finance Advisory Board. From 2013 until 2020, Judge Bell served on the Governor's Mental Health Diversion Council, which he chaired the ad hoc committee from 2014 until 2020. He is the former president of the Southwest Michigan Probate Judges Association, former president of the Kalamazoo County Bar Association, and former member of Western Michigan University's Haworth College of Business Council. So let's gear up for an exciting presentation by Judge Bell on the Silver Tsunami.
Thank you, Attorney Dupler, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone this evening. So good evening to everyone. And before I forget, I want to send out a thank you to our technical support, Mr. Nate Pylon. I appreciate his willingness to be here this evening as well and assist us as we navigate this Zoom presentation. As you can see, the presentation was actually provided to the attendees of the National Judicial College. So in its original format, it was designed for judges. And one of the things that we as judges need to be cognizant of is the changing nature of the people that we are serving, and in particular, the demographic shifts that are occurring. So that's really what this presentation was originally designed for. However, it is very applicable to everyone in not just our community, our state, and our nation, because these are some real challenges that we have to talk about. And I am a firm believer that we really must plan for things that we know are going to happen. When we're talking about the demographic shift, this is not something that we're guessing about. This is not something that is speculative. This is something that is real. And as such, we need to be having conversations within our community and within our individual cohorts so that we are able to best meet the needs of our shifting demographic population. The learning objectives for this evening that we have laid out is to identify the challenges arising from the large increase in the aging population, identify probate court's jurisdiction, and consider ways to manage and streamline resources that we either currently have or that we are looking to create in the future. And I'll touch on one of these as a precursor. One of the things that Kalamazoo County has done, is to actually solicit the voters and to seek out some funding by way of a senior millage. And so we'll talk a little bit about that and whether or not the communities that you are in, whether that is something that is a viable option. We're also going to discuss briefly the issues of concurrent jurisdiction and ancillary jurisdiction. The questions of jurisdiction really will come into play as to how best your court systems can serve your needs and serve the needs of our seniors, as well as balancing those needs with the population, the younger population, and the middle-aged populations. So let's start out with some numbers. And these numbers are, to say the least, interesting, because unless we are confronted with the actual data, it's hard for us to kind of get a grip on what the concerns are as we see the shift in the population. So as you can see in this map, and I don't know, I don't know if my highlighter is working. Attorney Dupler, is it highlighting anything?
It's not highlighting anything, but we can see where your mouse is.
Okay, so you see the red dot where my mouse is?
Oh, I don't see a red dot. I see a white arrow around. Oh, no, there are two white arrows. Okay.
Okay. I will, well, hopefully you can see it's at the 46 million.
Yes.
All right, very good, thank you. So what this graph shows is that when we're talking specifically about the population that is age 65 or older, and what the trend has been from 1960 to 2060, what that will look like down here. And that's what that bottom bar is, right? And this is the number in millions. So if you look right now, or back in 2014, when this graph was produced, we had about 46 million individuals that were 65 or older in our population. Now, if you look back to the 1900s, early 1900s, that was only 5 million people. So from the period of the early 1900s to 2014, that had risen by over 40 million individuals. By the year 2016, that number had risen to about 49.2 million. So right about in the middle here, that is actually higher than what had been approximated in the survey. So we had that increase in 2016 to almost 50 million. By 2020, now we have 55 million individuals that are over the age of 65. Now, what does that mean in terms of our population? Our population is getting older as a percentage of our overall numbers here in the United States. Let me show you this in a different way. So looking at 1950, we can see that the population here at this very top number of 85 and older, very small. The population of 65 and older, which would be about here, again, very small. If you then look at in 2015, what's happening here? So at this point, we have a triangle, right? Now it's taking shape more of a rectangle, and looking again at that percentage, again, the 65 and over about here. In this group right here, this cohort in the dark brown, who are those individuals? Those are our baby boomers. And so they're making their way through. Now look at that first chart. They were down here, right? They were the ones at the zero that are starting to make their way through the demographic chart. And so by 2015, the darker brown again, they're making their way up to balance this out a little bit more to make it a pure rectangle. So by 2060, at this point in time, we have our baby boom population that is now 85 or older. And if you notice what's happened here is we have a pretty good rectangle in terms of our population, which is a third over 60 and over, another third approximately in that middle age group, and another third in that younger group, 25 and under. And if you remember looking back at our original population spreadsheet, it was nowhere near this rectangular shape with a third, a third, a third. This is the product of modern medicine, healthier living, and healthier lifestyles. So what does this mean? What do these demographic shifts specifically mean to you and I, to our court systems, to our society at large? And if you take a moment just to think about what would your predictions be? And I know that most of our viewers know the Back to the Future here. And so let's think about what if we had the Back to the Future vehicle, that DeLorean, I believe, that could take us where we wanted to go into the future. What would that look like for our communities? Well, we have to look at specifically the probate court, which is the court that primarily deals with the issues associated with the aging. Probate jurisdiction, which is again what the area I serve in, we deal with for the mental health piece, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because older folks do tend to have some mental health issues as they become older, dementia, and other Alzheimer's part of dementia, but we tend to have more difficulty as we age. Not everyone, but as a general matter. We also deal with the conservatorships and guardianships. So when someone has assets that they need to have managed, the court intervenes upon petition and makes decisions as to whether or not that person can effectively manage their assets anymore. And that comes into play if an individual doesn't have some sort of advance directive as to what to do, and that advance directive is not or is challenged. Even if you have one, sometimes that's when the court gets involved. We also deal with guardianships, and that has to do with the questions of your ability to sign, or our ability to sign legal documents, to understand the decisions and the consequences of those decisions. So we have to look at whether or not, again, by the standard of clear and convincing evidence, whether or not someone has that capacity to make those decisions, and whether or not, again, they have any sort of advance directive as to what should occur if in fact they become disabled. If they don't have that advance directive, or if that advance directive is challenged, again, it ends up back in the probate court. These are all jurisdictional issues. We also deal with the issue of when someone passes, and the responsibilities of probating the estate, or the challenges associated with a will or a trust. And so those are all issues that the probate court does that directly affects a senior population. So that's one of the things we have to talk about when we're talking about what does it look like, and what is the court's responsibility, and what we should do to best serve our aging population. And so the probate court's role is to serve the needs of its clientele, and a significant number of our individuals are seniors and facing the issues that I had discussed earlier. And so as a probate judge, my role is to provide the best services possible and to look into the future and say, how can we be ready to address the increased needs of our population? If you want to think about it this way, when you are under 18, okay, you're not going to be having that much interaction with the court. You may be looking at adoptions. You may have some delinquency issues. You may have some protection proceedings that need to be done. But those are really limited in terms of what those needs are. You bump that up to that full younger demographic of under 25, then we're talking about how do most people interact with the with the justice system when they're that young? Well, it could be domestic relations, it could be criminal court, it could be civil court, whether that's going to be something associated with small claims or district court matter or circuit court matter. Then you move into the middle group, right? The folks, that middle demographic. Again, you're dealing with some of the same issues. You're dealing with assets, you're dealing with contract disputes, but what are you also dealing with when you're dealing with that demographic set? You're dealing with domestic relations matters. People, the statistics used to be approximately half of marriages end in divorce. I don't know what that statistic is like now, but I know it's probably fairly close to what it used to be. And so again, those are the issues that are unique to someone who's in that middle age. Questions of custody because they now have children. Those are the things that the courts are concerned with that center demographic group. And then the senior group, as I indicated, that is primarily issues that the probate court deals with, which is the court that I serve in. So what should I do to anticipate what is needed to help this demographic navigate the justice system? Well, we know that we need to have resources in terms of judicial officers sufficient to meet that increased demand that's going to be occurring over the course of the next decade or two. So that is one of the things and one of the reasons why this presentation was prepared, to talk to my colleagues and talk about the need for shifting resources to better serve the clientele. Because as we know, remember, if we're looking at that pyramid structure, right, that triangle, and as it widens out, we go from a smaller number at the top, which were our senior population, and then the balance was the middle and the lower population, to something that's going to be more equally represented for each demographic. So quite naturally, as the demographic increases for our senior population, the numbers, what's going to happen to those other numbers? They're going to be reduced and then made even with that of the senior population. And so the resources that we have currently aligned with certain areas of our population will need to be realigned to better serve our senior population. Ms. Dupler, if there are questions or comments, if you can simply signal me so that I know to respond.
Okay, sure. I don't think we have any right now.
Okay, very good. Thank you all. And then the last question that we have is, what can you do as a citizen of our state and a citizen of our nation? Because really, government reacts to citizens. We are here to serve citizens. And if you have concerns about how resources are allocated, it is your responsibility, just as it is my responsibility, to make sure that our leaders are aware that this is shifting and make them aware that they must plan. When we know something is going to occur, there is no excuse not to plan. So your predictions, and if you have any predictions, I would like to hear those, and if you can send them to Ms. Dupler. So I want to show you a clip, and this is Saturday Night Live is really, in a lot of ways, keeps the pulse of the community, and they sort of respond to things that are going on that are front and center, and that includes some social issues as well. And I think that this piece very well reflects the issues associated with the conflicts associated with the aging population demographic towards the top, the 65 and over, the middle, and the lower demographic. So let's take a second to look how they have addressed this on SNL. Okay, so that sets the stage for the game show. And by the very nature of calling it Millennial Millions, we know that they're going to be pitting the millennials against a group. Well, what group most naturally is would appear to be contesting, I don't want to say in conflict, but contesting or fighting for resources that are out there? It is the baby boomers. Because the millennials, as they're working their way through, trying to find their way, getting their jobs, fighting for their healthcare insurance, it's the same thing for our senior population. And so let's see how the SNL skit, how they play this out. Clearly, that's an over-exaggeration of the conflict, and it's an oversimplification of the conflict. But what it reflects is that even in programming such as Saturday Night Live, there is that vein running through that recognizes that when you have limited resources and you have different needs for different populations, that there's going to be a decision or sets of decisions that are made to figure out what and how those resources, those scarce resources, are going to be managed. So how will the probate court address the growing and diverse needs of our aging population? Well, some of the things that we can do is we know that we're going to have an increased processing for individuals who have disabilities. And I want to note that the Michigan Bar Journal back in 2018 determined that about 25% of the population suffers from disabilities that are over 55. So I'll restate this a different way. Once an individual reaches 55 years of age, according to, again, the Michigan Bar Journal 2018, they are going to, 25% of the population are going to begin to suffer some form of disability. And so we know that that's going to occur as the demographic shifts. We need to be prepared for processing those issues associated with disabilities, whether it is a situation in which it's a Social Security request or it's a probate matter, because we don't deal with Social Security, that's a federal issue, or if it's a probate matter dealing with the issues of conservatorships and guardianships. We also need to recognize that we're going to have an increased need to manage decedents' estates and adjudication of wills. And one of the things I want to emphasize to everyone in the audience here is that on many occasions, we have individuals who will come into court, whether it's a trust that's being contested, which trust assets normally go outside of the court unless they're being contested. But when they come into court, when they're being contested, or whether it's a will being contested, what I've found out is that one of the significant problems is that the decision of the decedent or the settlor in the trust case, he or she is not communicated effectively with their loved ones. And so I'm going to encourage the audience to make sure that when they have an opportunity, first of all, make sure that your estate is in good order. And you've thoughtfully considered what you want to have done and what vehicle you want to have to use to convey your wishes. And that's not only just when you pass, but also in the event that you become disabled. That is communicated to the people that you love and that love you. Communication can go a long way, whether it is saying to the son, the daughter, the aunt, the uncle, that this is what I'm going to do, and I know this is not what you would want, but these are my assets, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm leaving, home to this person or that person. Communicating that information, though you don't have to, would go a long way in avoiding and averting these high conflict cases in which someone says that it was never communicated and there was some undue influence that was had upon the decedent or the settlor. And so communication is good, and that will reduce the amount and the likelihood of litigation in these cases.
Judge Bell, can I ask a question on
Yes,
that
certainly.
issue? So are you saying that in addition to having formal estate planning drafted and signed, that there should also be communication with close family members about kind of the contents of that plan?
I am. I'm a huge proponent of that, and it's anything related to the estate. For example, I mean, I've had cases, and I'm sure you've seen them, Attorney Dupler, in which people are fighting over whether to cremate a loved one or to have the person buried, and those are some of those basic conversations that we can have. And I know that they're hard. I know that they're hard, but they do get easier the more you have those conversations with your family as things change. If you have a certain desire to disinherit someone, or a desire to do more for one or the other, it's important to communicate what you want to do. Again, trying to reduce the likelihood that there is going to be conflict once your wishes have been undertaken by the person you've given responsibility to do that for. So that's my take on that. Also, ordering guardianships and conservatorships. So the way that these things work and what the statute requires is that there are persons of priority. So if someone is nominated to serve as your guardian, and they have that instrument identified, or if they can articulate that, the court has to give preference to that and grant that request unless they're otherwise not appropriate. And so again, it goes back to that communication and thinking about these harder decisions before you become vulnerable, because that way they can be communicated.
Judge Bell, we have a question from a participant. It's in the chat feature. The participant's name is Michael Unsworth. His question or comment first is, I've heard horror stories when a family member contests wills and it can take years to resolve. And his question is, how common is this issue?
The issue is incredibly common. The issue itself is the length of time is going to depend on your court process. The people that work in our probate court here, we really, there's some time standards that are kind of the guidelines that all the courts must adhere to when it comes to a criminal case, a civil case, a probate contested case dealing with wills or a trust challenge, there are timelines that we are given. I will say in our county, we have a very dedicated group of individuals serving our citizens, and we do not have situations that take years to resolve. I believe very firmly that justice delayed is justice denied, and we are dedicated to making sure that we get those issues resolved in a timely manner. So, but I do know that there are situations out there that last years before they're resolved. But those situations would be the anomaly. The commonplace of will contest does occur, and those are matters that we have to deal with. But again, if we communicate, we're going to have a reduction in the likelihood of that occurring. That's a good question. So the other thing that we as a probate court can look at is monitoring for elder abuse, personal and financial, by ordering case management and getting petitions to change or modify guardianships. So the APS is the Adult Protective Services. That's what this abbreviation stands for. And again, our county, Kalamazoo, does a really nice job, and we have a lot of very dedicated APS workers. And so they will either get referrals from neighbors, friends of a prospective ward, as well as referrals by the court. We have on several occasions been concerned about an adult that we thought perhaps was being taken advantage of, that had assets, that we would make those referrals. So we have to be vigilant when it comes to protecting individuals who may be vulnerable. And that vigilance is across the board. So if you have, as a citizen, a neighbor, a friend, a loved one, that you have are suspecting being manipulated financially or personally, people stopping by that never used to stop by, that sort of a peculiar activity, it doesn't hurt to call APS so that they can go out and do an investigation. If you have a parent that has financial assets that continue to be reduced, or the money that you thought that they had or were providing gifts for family members, those kind of dry up. It could simply be because they're running out of money for legitimate reasons, or it could be that they are sending their money to a scam artist. I'll give you one quick story, and this is one of the most difficult ones, where we had a son who was out of state, who believed that his mother was sending money out of state to support religious organizations, as well as other organizations that were telling her that they would send her things. And so we have a hearing, and at the hearing, it is very clear that she does not have capacity and not understanding, and she had sent tens of thousands of dollars of her retirement after her husband passed to scam artists who were telling her they were going to send her things, who were telling her, threatening her, and she had gotten so deep into it that she had lost sight, because of her diminished capacity, of what was going on. And the son out of state recognized it, did an APS referral, and we had our hearing. At the hearing, it was discovered that she had pulled out a loan and sent another $10,000 to the same scammers who were threatening her, after we had a hearing on the whole thing, and it was determined very clearly that they were perpetrating fraud on her. And at this subsequent hearing, discovered she sent $10,000 after we made that decision. And so I ordered the conservator, which was a public conservator, to go to the place where she had the picked up. I don't know, it was UPS or one of them, and kind of intervened to stop that money from going out. After the hearing, she went to the same place and beat the conservator to the UPS store and retracted the money and figured out a way to send it through another mechanism. And so that's how serious this gets, because when they fall prey to these scam artists, it is really sad. And particularly when the person is lonely, doesn't have a lot of interaction, and here are these people that are paying her attention or paying her or him attention. It makes it real easy for them to fall prey to these scam artists. So these are the areas that we'll continue to see increase, and we need to take a active role in making sure that that this doesn't occur. Also, managing areas of mental health, and the probate court handles involuntary commitments. I referenced this a little bit earlier. And the fact of the matter is, as we age, we are more likely to come up with and suffer from dementia. And let me pull some numbers here. Check and see there's a page that deals with that. It's about the written notes below. And so we know that that is going to increase. And in Michigan, and I'm looking for my specific notes on this, back in 2014, we had approximately 200 and some, 200 and some doctors that specialized in geriatric care. And we need about the estimate is almost 900 is what we actually need. Now that increased pretty significantly by 2016, I believe. I'm working off of memory here a little bit, but we still are woefully short when it comes to doctors who can treat geriatric patients as a specialty. So what do we do with that information? Well, we have to look at how we can increase and we know the need's going to be there, as we've been talking about. We know that this is going to be a need. We've got to make a concerted effort to make sure that there are enough doctors who can provide that care, mental health care, care relative to dementia, and whether it's Alzheimer's type or other type. Let me give you a few numbers on this. And in Michigan, in 2018, there were 180,000 individuals who suffered from Alzheimer's. It is estimated that Michigan is the 6th leading state in which Alzheimer's kills our citizens. So out of all the states in the union, we rank number 6. We're tied with, I think, New York and New Jersey at that level in terms of the deaths that occur because of Alzheimer's in our state. We know that 1 in 10 persons over 65 are going to develop Alzheimer's. Financial consequences. We have here in Michigan 517 family caregivers that provide support for Alzheimer's patients. We have 589 million hours of uncompensated time, $7.4 billion in value for uncompensated time, $1.4 billion in Medicaid charges. These are real numbers that are there. And again, these are all resources that are allocated to provide the necessary care for our seniors. So there's a saying that talks about the 2030 problem and trying to ensure what the resources are going to be like when the baby boomers are at their height as the young old in terms of the numbers being 61 million. We have to have the public policy that provides the economic and social well-being for our senior citizens. There are going to be challenges, as we've been talking about, to the public and private institutions. And these challenges need to be handled in order to prevent further burdening in the future. So looking at courts around our nation, just to give you a flavor of what other states are doing, Some courts have, for probate court, which deal with these issues, they have separate courts, such as Michigan. We have, there are 15 states that have constitutional courts for probate court. Most states have it defined by statutory language. And if you hear different terms in other states, they're all the same sort of vehicle. Sometimes they're called orphans courts, surrogate courts, courts of ordinary, chancery courts, courts of equity. And so every state has a different way of describing them. And let me move on because we're running short on time. So jurisdiction is the authority by which a court may exercise its power over a designated category of judicial controversy. So all of the examples that I was talking about earlier, from the involuntary treatment to guardianships to conservatorships, those are jurisdictional. Those are what the probate court has the ability to exert power over and make decisions concerning. That's what jurisdiction is. And so other courts have other jurisdictions. So for example, the district court, it has jurisdiction over civil cases. So when it's individual against individual, or corporation against corporation, it's an individual right. They have jurisdiction over that, on civil cases under $25,000. The circuit court has jurisdiction of over $25,000. Another quick example, the district court has jurisdiction, the ability to hear over misdemeanors. Circuit court has jurisdiction to hear over felonies. So I think you get the idea. Courts have different authorities. Now, these are just some numbers. I'm gonna skip through those to talk about this. So when you have different jurisdictions and you know that there is going to be the need to move resources to meet the needs of its citizens, how can you best do that? Well, you best do it by the concept of concurrent jurisdiction. That is to say that the courts are flexible enough to be able to respond to the change in need, okay? Responding to the change in demographic. And that's, I'm going to skip through some of this because it's more minutia. So the Unified Trial Court, this was, the legislature actually had some pretty good foresight in looking at what we could do in terms of our resources to meet challenges as they confronted the court. I would like to think one of those challenges they recognize is the shifting in demographics, and the needs of our seniors are different than the needs of our middle age demographic than the young demographic. So effective in 2013, they mandated concurrent jurisdictional planning so that what was once before you had a judge that could only hear within his or her own jurisdiction, so for example, probate court with the items that I talked about, district court with the items I talked about, and circuit court with the items I talked about. Effective in 2013, judges could be moved around outside of their jurisdiction so that they could effectively manage what their community needs are. Berrien County was one of the first pilots to institute this, and they did this back in 2003, and the legislature had given them specific authority to do that. So they have been operating since 2003 under a consolidated court system. We in Kalamazoo, we did have our concurrent jurisdiction plan. We created an executive judicial council, and we had 6 months of strategic planning, and we hired in an outside expert. And we continue to try to meet the needs of our citizens by applying some of the principles that were discussed and worked on in that concurrent jurisdiction planning. So in terms of the number of cases that we have, all of this information is public. So you can go on our probate website And you can see the numbers and the trends that are occurring, because we have to report all of our information to the Michigan Supreme Court, SCAO, which is State Court Administrative Office, which supplies and compiles that information to us as well as the public. You can also look on the district court and the circuit court, and you can start to see trends that are occurring. This is really preparation by information. Again, we know this is going to occur. So when we know something's going to occur, we have to use the information that we have to better prepare for that ultimate outcome. As a judge, it's not going to be my call. I can prepare my house, so to speak, here so that we are as prepared as we can. But really, it's up to the citizens to figure out what they want to do and how resources should be allocated to meet the various needs of our citizenry. Get the data, that's always a starting point. Figure out what cases need to be, case trends that are going on, and figure out what needs to happen. These are the Alzheimer figures that we've already talked about. These are just simply more Alzheimer's figures talking about the emotional stress, the depression that occurs from by way of the individuals that are the caretakers, and the financial consequences associated with providing care, the consequences not only on the care provider, but also on the individual who is suffering. These are those numbers I talked about, physicians. So the need is about 900. In 2014, there were 220, and that need of almost 900 is by 2030. One of the good things that has happened is the area on agency, they do provide a 6-week training for caregivers with patients of dementia if your specific area on aging does that. It's 12 of the 16. So hopefully yours provides it, and if not, maybe perhaps encourage them to do so. External resources, we talked a little bit about this. Talked about the funding units. This is most typically it's going to be your county, and the questions about what and how they're going to meet the needs of the senior citizens as they continue to age is something that needs to be discussed and planned for. We in Kalamazoo, I mentioned this earlier about the senior millage. We passed a senior millage, again, recognizing that the problem and the difficulties that are going to occur are only going to get more challenging for us. Also, your legal community. And the legal community now has some senior issues are actually a specialized area of the bar, the elder section, and there are many people that are serving in that. And there's actually now a certificate that they are issuing that can provide some sort of guidance to the consumer to know whether or not your individual has that certificate and that specific requisite to receive that. This is a discussion about the certification, and I want to leave you with one thought of a retired probate judge, and this is a quote that he had given. And I just really, I've always appreciated him and his insight in terms of various issues in the probate world. And what he says is that the probate court culture arises out of the unique nature of the work we have historically done. Probate judges have always been given jurisdiction over stuff that is most fundamental to the human condition: guardians for the old and disabled, protection for the young and vulnerable, nurturing of the wayward youth, and dealing with the issues of the dead and dying. This is the very human stuff that made us different as judges in our court practices. And since that quote was provided, the jurisdiction over the youth had been transferred to the circuit court. So that was part of that reorganization with the One Family, One Court that happened back around 1998. So with that, I think maybe ran a little bit over than my 50 minutes, but I would like to open up for any questions or comments.
Well, Judge, I'll mention that there was a comment a moment ago. It looks like a comment in the chat that essentially says that there's a concern that there are some instances, like in Kent County, is what this person's referring to, where court-appointed conservators and guardians have far too many clients at once, and that there's a concern that there's corruption in the system when that occurs, or when there aren't the annual reports. I'm thinking they're thinking the annual accountings are not done timely, or families aren't kept updated. So I'm going to kind of turn that into a question. What does your court do to ensure that cases are moved along and families are kept updated accordingly?
Well, if they are an interested party, they're notified of what filings have occurred. And that's required if they're an interested party. We are very fortunate. Like I say, our staff is excellent, and we go through, whether it's an annual accounting or whether it's a report that's needed to be supplied under guardianship, or whether it's a DD review. Actually, the DD review, let me clarify, developmentally disabled individual. That's what I refer to when I say a DD. The statute, in my opinion, is woefully inadequate when it comes to the ability for oversight and review after the initial appointment. And again, these are individuals who have developmental disabilities. And by definition, they've had that prior to the age of 22, and it affects their life circumstance so that they can't navigate. We recognized that this was woefully inadequate. And so a few years ago, we partnered with Western Michigan University, their medical school, the Homer Stryker Medical School. And we actually have the doctors or doctors-to-be that are provided a training, and then they go out and they actually visit with our developmentally disabled individuals on a more frequent basis than that, because we do need to have more feedback. And we had discovered, I believe, 2 cases in which we had to go in and change the guardian in those cases out of all the numbers. So I would agree that there are certainly problems, but again, with our partnership with Western, we aren't paying them. If we had an individual or individuals that were hired in to do this job, then we wouldn't be able to do it, because we don't have the funds to supply that oversight, because it's not required under the statute to do that more frequent visitation, and so we simply wouldn't have the resources. And I'll note, even before we had the doctors that were going out and doing this, or the med students, we actually had, probably a decade ago before my time, we had volunteers that were trained and would go out and do this sort of thing as well. But again, we had to have someone that was supervising them, and we simply didn't have the funds to continue to do that. So it's that balance, right? We certainly know that if we had all the resources that would require, that would allow us to provide this supervision, we wouldn't have to always keep going to try to get people to do it voluntarily. But it's a process. It's a problem of resources, and that's really the heart of what I'm talking about here, is that resource allocation. And we've got to decide as citizens where our resources should go, and whether or not it's to have more frequent visits for folks that are under a disability and under a court order in the adult system or the senior population, or should we have that in the neglect and abuse system where they're youth? And so those are the conflicts in terms of the resources that we have to have real discussions about.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to raise their hand to ask the question, or to submit that through the chat or question answer feature? This is a really good opportunity for you to ask your questions. Everyone's being quiet and shy right now, it looks like.
That's all right.
So I guess, Judge, I have a question related to what you made a comment on a moment ago in terms of the partnership that your court has, it sounds like, with Western Michigan Medical School.
Yes.
Is that something that you are required to do as a judge, to seek out that kind of partnership, or I guess what's the impetus of that?
The impetus was the need. We recognized that it needed to happen, and do we have to do that? No. As a court, as a judge, we don't have to do that. But when you recognize there's a need and there's a problem, then you have to be creative sometimes with coming up with a solution. And so
it's something that you see from the bench in a way that you can serve the community better if you pull together those resources.
Absolutely. And that's what when I had the lumber on the screen, that's what it's about. It's pulling together the resources that sometimes you don't think about, that may be out there, to figure out a way to solve the problem without imposing additional costs on the public at large.
Okay. In that response, it looks like we got a couple other questions. Somebody asked, who oversees the system, the judge and the guardians, etc.?
They're ultimately, it's the court's responsibility. That's a short answer. If I appoint someone to serve as a guardian, I'm putting trust in them to do what is required. We require that they will have a video. There is some, reporting requirements that are periodic to let us know what's going on. But it really is being responsible, because but for the authority that we as judges give them, they wouldn't have that supervision. So frankly, I take it very personal, and want to make sure that the people that I'm putting in those positions are doing what is best for the ward. Can I or any other judge predict if something goes awry? No, we can't. We just do the best we can based on the information that's presented. And that includes criminal background checks, that includes DHS, investigations concerning child welfare and adult protective services. So we do our due diligence on that issue. And we also, again, provide notice to all the interested parties. So hopefully, if there are problems, that the people that are provided notice will let us know.
And Judge, you've referenced a couple of times the interested parties. I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure if our participants do. So do you mind just telling, where the lines are for different interested persons, whether it's the same for every type of probate case?
It's not. It's different, and it's usually by statutory construction, and so, or court rule. And so the simplest way to think about it, and the easiest way to make this as an example, if, for example, I am not able or capable of navigating life anymore, right? And I need a conservator and a guardian. But my wife and I are separated, but we're still married. She doesn't know what's necessarily going on. And so a neighbor petitions me. Well, she still has the right to notice because we're still legally married. She still is an interested party, as are my children. And so it just depends on the circumstance and the relationship.
Okay. And then there's another question. Someone asked, what would you recommend for citizens to push for more resources for local probate courts?
It's a great question. I think it depends on your jurisdiction. Depending on where you are, we've been pretty well supported. We can always use more resources, so I'm not saying that, but we have been pretty well supported by our community, and certain things that we wish we could do, we can't do. And I think finding out what your jurisdiction, what the needs are for your jurisdiction, how do you do that? As simply as calling up your probate register, the administrator who runs the probate court, and inquire look, I'm concerned about these sort of issues. What do we have sufficient resources? Because it really is making yourself aware of what's going on. Sadly, the only time we ever really know what's going on is if we have these sort of conversations, or if we find ourselves in the midst of a judicial controversy, right? And that's when we find out, wow, this is inadequate. And that's why a lot of times the people that are the strongest advocates for a individual cause are people that have been affected by what's going on. And so I don't think I answered your question as directly as I wanted to, but it really depends on what your jurisdiction is and then what your exposure or experience has been, because it's always best to go ahead and work from the passion that you have naturally.
Okay, and Judge, I found, it looks like we have two questions right now that I see. One is, do you share your resolutions with other probate judges? For example, a unique situation that you had never faced but were able to resolve?
The short answer is absolutely yes. The probate judges have a listserv, and we communicate complicated issues, how we resolve issues. Not that everyone agrees, for certain. That's certainly not the case, and I'm sure, Ms. Attorney Dupler, you can attest to that. Every judge sees the world through his or own lens, and so those lenses affect how he or she makes the ruling. But we certainly do have a venue or a way to communicate with one another when we're not certain. And even if we are certain, sometimes we still communicate that out just for the benefit of our colleagues. And so we do have that listserv and share that, and it is very actively used by the probate judges. We also have conferences. We have a probate conference, and what happens is we have something called the roundtable, and they cover anywhere from 10 to 20 issues that have been kind of in the forefront over the course of the preceding year, and then they roll out the answers that judges best and best not guess, but best determination. And so we try to keep each other informed of what's trending and what needs to be done.
Okay, and then I have another question here. It says, if you think your mother needs a guardian or a conservator, what's the difference? And where do you go to find a guardian or a conservator?
Great question, great procedural question. In the simplest form, a guardianship is over the individual to protect and to make decisions for that individual. Contracts, living arrangements, anything that a person would need to do to function in life. A conservator handles the money. So if a person is, for example, you have a person who's on Social Security, they have no assets, they are in a nursing home, and the only money they receive is Social Security. They would only need a guardian, because a conservator is not necessary because they don't have any assets. In the federal assets, they're made to be accountable to the federal government for that. So in that case, you would have a guardian, but not a conservator. And where do you go? You would go to your probate court. If you feel that a loved one needs a guardian or a conservator, you go to the probate court. Our probate court has an intake where we kind of work with the people that have the concern to see whether or not there are other alternatives to legal intervention, and what's going to be best for that individual. And then courts can't give legal advice. We can give forms, but we can't give legal advice. And then at that point in time, if you still think that the individual would need a guardian or conservator, you file that with the court. And if you as the family member are seeking to be the guardian and or the conservator, you would nominate yourself. If you would not want to be that, but someone else you think would be appropriate to serve the money, let's say you have one sibling that's an accountant, the other is a lawyer, maybe you want to have the lawyer serve as the guardian, the accountant serve as the conservator. So they can be broken up, and sometimes it's good to have them broken up in that role. If you don't have someone that is either ready, willing, and able to serve in this role, you can also ask for the court to appoint a public. And we have, in Kalamazoo County, we have some very good public conservators and guardians.
think that might be it from the chat and the question answer.
All right. Well,
Judge, is there anything else that you were really wanting to say tonight that you didn't get a chance to?
no, well, yes, I just want to say I appreciate, never give a lawyer or a judge a chance to talk some more, right? I really appreciate the opportunity to spend the evening with you and talking about these issues. And I encourage you to follow up. And if you have those concerns, or if you know someone that is in need of help, reach out to your court. And generally speaking, most courts will at least direct you in a good direction. Also, bear in mind, if you're concerned about someone's well-being and they're an adult, contact your local adult protective services. They do a nice job, and that's what they're there for.
Okay, thank you again so much, Judge. We really enjoyed learning from you, getting to know you a little bit better, and I thank everyone for attending tonight, and hopefully some of you will be available to attend next week to People's Law School on the new auto no-fault reform. Everybody have a good night, and thank you again.
Thank you, counsel. Have a good one.
You too.